you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
Wait. Okay, I don't know what Carol was saying, but I'm recording this now, and the topic for today is exploring sources of support for enhancing volunteer engagement. And I know that a lot of these suggestions for topics come from each of you, and I'm so just grateful that you think of these things. And you were able, I think someone suggested we have a speaker, and I was excited. I was excited that, could you just mute you? Okay. Okay. Can you all still hear me? We may not be able to be, okay. Our guest speaker today is Jennifer Holz, who is from Maryland, and she is the 2023 individual winner of the CSN McCoy Award. And so we're so gratified to have her today because she's going to talk about her wonderful experience with volunteers and give us some ideas about things that we can do. So take it away, Jennifer.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Deborah. I am so honored to be on this call as your guest speaker today. I thank you so much for the invitation. And yes, the being the recipient of the Maureen McCoy Award this year was not only an amazing surprise, but it's also been kind of uncomfortable to accept on my own, because I have to say everything I do well, I do with my team, and my team consists mostly of volunteers. So it's hard for me to almost accept this in such a way, because I really owe so much to the folks that I work with, both from a staff level, but especially from a volunteer level. So it's really special for me to be on this call and kind of share with you some of my experience with our amazing volunteers over the years. So I'm just going to kind of dive in and turn into jabberjaws for a minute, if you all don't mind, and then feel free to poke me if you have a question. I just wanted to, talk a little bit about the fact that I celebrated my 17th anniversary with AARP last month. So I've been with AARP for a long time, and I've seen the organization change and shift, and I've seen priorities change, but I've also seen the way in which we engage volunteers and the way in which we value volunteers, and the way in which we lean on volunteers change significantly over the years. And when I first started out as a youngster, I would say that I almost felt guilty working with volunteers. I almost felt like I was asking too much and leaning too hard when I would call people up on the phone and say, hey, we have a big event in a couple of weeks. Can you come out and help? And I started to realize how wrong I was in having that feeling, and how our volunteers were always at the ready, and they were always willing to assist, and they were always willing to offer their expertise and their passion in the field. And as time went on, volunteer engagement became a huge priority for the organization. And as our state offices started to realize just how important that was, our entire way of doing our business changed 110%. So we started to look for new ways to engage our volunteers. And some of those ways worked and some of them didn't. For a long time, we were really focused on recruitment. The more people, the better, right? The more folks on our team, the more we can do. And some of that can be true, but over the years, I have found, and I know that my colleagues have found, that quality over quantity is definitely the best strategy. And the folks that I work best with are the folks that I have developed very close relationships with. They are my colleagues. They are my friends. These are people that I spend time with day in and day out. And not having those close, tight-knit relationships doesn't get me far. It doesn't get our team far. So it is really important in terms of the investment in the relationship to focus on just that. So that is one lesson I learned over the years. Fast forward to now and post-COVID, we are definitely focused on that quality of volunteer, but I've also become more focused on the realization that autonomy is so important, that volunteers are reliable and they are incredible experts in the fields they choose to be. And I have adopted, thank you to Tara Shaver, for those of you who know her, our advisor in OVE, I have adopted the bless and release mantra. So I have come to trust my volunteers more than I ever have in the past. And I am not disappointed in any way whatsoever. That level of trust that I've invested in them, they know what they're doing. I trust that they know what they're doing. They come to me when they need me, and we get the job done. So the autonomy that I give them, I think they appreciate, and I'm not micromanaging, and I trust them to approach me when they need me. So yeah, so I do a lot of that bless and release. And you know, staff at AARP, believe it or not, a lot of us are not experts. We are touted as experts, but a lot of us are working on so many different priorities within the organization. You know, from livable communities to caregiving to fraud to social security. It just would not be possible for me to house that much expertise in my own brain, right? So I've really come to realize also that there are volunteers out there who are willing to become that high level expert that I can never be in the position that I'm in. I'll give you a great example, and this example is one of the reasons why I was nominated for the Maureen McCoy Award this year. We have a volunteer, her name is Karen Morgan, and some of you may have met her before, but she is dynamite. She retired, I think, just before COVID hit, and she was working in the legislature pretty much her entire career, but has developed a really strong knowledge base and passion for combating fraud. And lucky for us, she lives in Maryland and happened to be good friends with our state director. So he quickly recruited her upon retirement and brought her in to learn a little bit more about the Fraud Watch Network. And that was a light touch. She was able to kind of learn about what AARP was doing in this realm, why AARP found, you know, combating fraud and scams to be such a high priority. And she really, truly took it and ran. I mean, when I say run, like she took off with this particular issue. To the point now where, as the staff lead on fraud, no one knows who I am. No one in the world of fraud in the state of Maryland really knows who I am. She is the point of contact for all of our attorney general contacts, for our comptroller contacts, for the Department of Labor contacts, all of the folks that we work on this issue. She is their woman. And she is being recruited as a speaker at the national level by our AARP colleagues. So I have to kind of protect her and keep her in my under my wing, because I'm afraid she's gonna, you know, take off and fly one day. But she's been recruited regionally. She just did an event in Virginia this past weekend. And you know, it really took me realizing that I don't control this. I am not the expert on this issue, and I need to allow her to do what she's good at, and to be the expert that she is, and all of the time that she invests in research and in relationship building under this issue. It's taken this office at this team, AARP Maryland, farther than we ever could have without her on this particular issue. And I'm a big believer also that volunteers should look and act and smell like staff. You know, volunteers so often from the Maryland State Office are mistaken for staff people because they understand how our team works. They understand, they've drank the AARP Kool-Aid, and that's great. But that all came through relationship building and through bringing them in under our wings early on and doing, you know, some really effective engagement strategies. So we treat them no differently than we do staff people. And So those are some key points that I wanted to mention while I was on the line here. Volunteers across the organization, and Maryland is no different. You are our workforce. There's a whole lot more of you than there are of us. And we need to start to realize what a valuable asset that is. And I know the organization does, but I think each individual staff person at AARP really needs to take a close look at who's driving the work behind AARP, and trust you all to do it at the highest level. So that's been my experience in volunteer engagement. And if you had any questions for me, I am more than happy to keep jabbering along.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer, so much. And please, any of you, come off of mute, raise your hand if you wish. But questions, comments, what do you think? I appreciate Jennifer for actually getting us started today and helping to inspire us. So, Audrey, I think you've raised your hand first, please. Audrey.
Hey, Jennifer, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can. Hi, Audrey.
Hi. I was just wondering, you said 17 years?
Yeah.
That is incredible. And I want to wave across the Potomac River to you.
Oh, hello. Yes, 17 years. And it's so, someday I may pilfer you from the Virginia State Office, just like they've pilfered Karen. We're always happy to share.
I was just curious because I'm brand new. I've only been with the organization for a month. So always interested in hearing from, literally veterans that have been with this organization for quite some time. But I was curious how you got involved with the organization, and was it through your professional life?
Oh my gosh, that's the best question because I have the best story for this. So when I was exposed to AARP for the first time, I was working in the insurance industry, and I was settling claims for automobile accidents. And the company I was working for required us to do that in person. And one of my insureds rear-ended the state director of AARP at that time. So I had to physically go to the office and negotiate his claim with him. He's not with the organization anymore, so I feel perfectly fine that I'm not violating any rules here. I met him in person, and the more we talked, I was like, I really dig this guy. He's super cool, and I love the team. Every time I would come in, they were really nice to me and very professional. And I was looking for a change at the time because I was dealing with attorneys and all kinds of stuff that just wasn't fun for me. And I figured you don't get what you don't ask for. And I said, do you have a position open? And he said, as a matter of fact, as of 2 weeks ago, we do. And so I kind of just got a foot in the door as a program assistant. And then I gradually worked my way up. It was totally by chance. But I will tell you, I ended up getting pursued a year later by UMBC, the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, to enroll in their newest graduate program, which was the Management of Aging Services at the Erickson School. And that truly, I had a wonderful year at AARP, but that truly solidified my belief that I was in the right field. And I've taken that education and applied it to everything I've done at AARP. And as the organization has grown and changed, it's just been the perfect marriage. So I think AARP is stuck with me.
Very, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Audrey.
Christine, I saw your hand.
Yes. This is the first time I've met you, Jennifer. So I appreciate, I came in a little late trying to get my audio to work. You know how that is.
Oh, yes.
And I think the topic, right, is how to support and ideas for engaging with our volunteers. And I actually, and Deborah knows this, I was a volunteer for about 6+ years with the team that I'm now running. And so I got hired in as a program specialist and started doing some of that work. But right before Ron Bridges left, he shifted me over to manage the outreach for the Lexington folks, which is perfect, right? Because I'm one of them. And so now I truly understand, how emailing our volunteers can be quite a problem. So I'm seeing that and the various ways that we have to respect their time and how there's certain ways that some will respond and some won't and all of that. But one of the things that I did early on is, and I'm still in the process because we have nearly 50 volunteers, of course, probably about 30 are very active and about, there's a few 10 that are on the full-time workers that we don't see as much. But I right away started doing one-on-one meetings, and preferably I'd like to do it over a meal and just have some time to meet with them. But as I'm learning, because I've only been here since January, the third quarter, it's like, wait, what does the budget have to do that? And so I've been told to go back to Zoom, which it'll work, but it's just not as good as in person. And I have to tell you, that meeting with each person, as we all know, there is nothing like having the exclusive attention of your volunteer, and not because you're talking about what event that we're running and what needs to be done, but just to say, like, who are you? Where do you come from? What do you have? What do you want to do? And what I'm always telling them is that my job is to help you shine as bright or as dim as you want. If you want to be in the background, you're that kind of person that likes that, great. If you're the kind of person that wants to do what Jennifer, you were talking, we have a very person like that's taking the fraud presentations all over the state in incredible ways, in demand. People are asking for him. And so that's my job, is to just nurture you in whatever way that you want to be. And of course, yes, they're all experts, they're all been living a lot, and they have so much to say, and they have so much wisdom that I don't even see. And, we're real fortunate because we have these perspectives and feedback from such a diverse group. And in Lexington, Kentucky, it has a higher rate of, white folks and then Black folks, but we have such a mix. It's great. And I'm so excited because we all get along. Our meetings are just really, really productive. And just that if you can get that chance to do more one-on-ones, not just on the side, but just focus to them, it's so worth it.
I am 100% with you on that. And you're right. It is so hard to do in Maryland. And I see my colleague Kathy is on the line too, and she could probably give you the exact numbers, but we have somewhere around 450 people in our volunteer portal, right? So on what planet does a staff of 7 manage 450 people? And so I keep saying, okay, let's slow down with the recruitment piece and let's go through this list and try to relationship build, right? Which is what Kathy's doing right now. So we probably have about 100 people who are active, who have done something with us in the last year at least. And that's great. But the folks that you truly work with as if they are colleagues, they are the ones that you take out to lunch, like you were saying, that you hold these meetings with, you have the FaceTime with, and if you're lucky, they become friends with one another, and that motivates them even further. And we've seen that happen multiple times over the past couple of years, especially since we've all come back in person and folks are just anxious to get back in the community and talk to people. They are doing things on their own, and they're coming up with ideas on their own, and then they're doing fun stuff on their own, like they're going out on the weekends, or they're walking together on Monday mornings, and not things that we initiated as AARP. The relationship building is such a huge part of this. That's why I don't like to see the numbers get so out of control, because I think we do miss some people. They get lost in the mix. They get lost in the spreadsheet that you download from the portal, right? And it's just so important to be able to take that time. And it's not only in relationship building, but it's also in just the general invitation to come out and help. I have found that when I send a general email or put in a newsletter, a request for assistance, I don't really get a response. But if I write an individual, can you help me? This is what we need. I'd really appreciate your help. I get a response right away every time. So it's a delicate balance. And it's hard when you're working with so many people. It's a blessing to have so much interest. Don't get me wrong. But we need to be able to build those relationships. And we in Maryland are very lucky that we've had volunteers build relationships with one another to help make that easier for us as well. So I'm with you on all of that. And congratulations on your new post. Welcome to the South region.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we let Jennifer go to do her wonderful work, any more questions today for her before we get started on the rest of our day?
It looks like Susan Jones put something in the chat about having tips for planning events for the year.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, so that's a good one, Susan, because I find that our volunteers are very excited. And so they want to plan lots of events. And from our end, contractually, and as far as the budgeting is concerned, as Christine was saying, that can get really tricky because there's only so much that we can do. So what we've done is we have broken the state down regionally, which I'm sure many of you have done because states are big for the most part. And we have allowed our volunteers to kind of start looking at what priorities exist in their own county or region or town, whatever it is, and say, you know, hey, we only have so much money to work with, or we only have so much capacity to process this type of contract, but let us know what's coming to the top or rising to the top in terms of what you'd like to do this year. So whether it's a fair or it's an expo or it's a series of speaking events, we just encourage them to tell us what they believe is most important in their particular region. And that's a newer concept. We've been doing it since 2017, but obviously we were interrupted for a couple of years. So now we're kind of getting back into that regional focus and letting folks plan their events.
Okay. It looks like in the chat, Jennifer, we've got one more question. Susan from West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much. And I'm so glad to see all West Virginia's neighboring states on here. We got Maryland, Virginia, Kentucky. It's got me thinking like, oh, what can we do together? But
yeah.
quick question though. I'd say probably 90% of our volunteers are in our target communities. But every now and then we'll get volunteers who go, hey, I'm 3 hours away. You don't do in-person events in my area. What can I do? And sometimes we'll say, well, you can, do advocacy stuff online or this, that, and the other. And they're like, but I want to do something in my town.
Right.
Even though it's just me, I'm one person in this little small town. Do you have any thoughts on how we could engage those folks who want to be a part of the team, but we don't really have a lot going on in their area?
Yeah, you're not alone in that struggle. And I will tell you, even we have two communities of presence. One of them is Montgomery County, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. That's kind of my easy community. The other one is Baltimore City. And believe it or not, well, I should say Baltimore Metro because it includes the county and some other zip codes, but that's not where we have a lot of strength. So sometimes I'm finding that in Howard County, which has nothing to do with either, we have a ton of volunteers. So it's kind of, there's some inconsistency there in terms of where all of our volunteers lie, and pockets of the state, certain pockets of the state become much more interested in the work that AARP is doing. And you'll just see that most of your volunteers end up coming from that area. In Western Maryland, I will give you, that is closest to you actually, in West Virginia. That is where I struggle the most. That is my territory out there. And in like Allegheny and Garrett County, those that border West Virginia, we have traditionally had 1 or 2 volunteers out there. And the only way in the past, now I'm struggling there right now since COVID, I've not recovered from, I've lost folks out there, but the only way that I've been able to make that work in the past is to work with other organizations, both internally and externally. So we had a chapter out there that was small but mighty. So that was really, really helpful at that time. I think they've since dissolved. We had tax aid sites out there. We had driver safety out there. So there were folks who were affiliated with those programs. And then we just kind of started working together instead of working in these separate silos like we oftentimes do. Even the retired school personnel, we had a few folks out there for some time. So instead of trying to have our own separate state office presence in that area of the state, we just found that really trying to work those partnerships was the best way to go. Also, we found that kind of clinging on to some of the more unusual events that we wouldn't expect to see out there to kind of draw attention to ourselves was helpful. In Western Maryland, it tends to be a very conservative area. And a couple of years back, we were able to sponsor their Pride Festival in Allegheny County, and folks were thrilled that we were there. So sometimes kind of putting yourself somewhere where folks didn't expect to see you helps to draw in more volunteer recruits, but also to allow the ones that do exist, even if there's only one or two of them, to get involved in a fun event. There's no magic pill for that one, but I feel your pain there. And those are some of the things that we've done there in the past.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. Really appreciate your coming today and sharing some ideas with us. We know there's always more that people can do and learn. So feel free to come back at any point. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mary for our next question.
Could I ask a question real quick before Jennifer goes away?
Well, sure. Jennifer, if you've got time.
I've got time.
Okay. Miss Jones?
Yes. So I'm a new community action team lead in Loudoun County, right over very close to Western. And in fact, my mother is in assisted living in Frederick, Maryland. But there seems to be a, sort of everything's by state. Is there, I mean, how in AARP can you cooperate across state lines?
So it's not as hard as you think. And by the way, I grew up in Frederick, Maryland, so very near and dear to my heart. I'd love to, work with you on something in Frederick. But I would say that the difficulty really comes in when it comes to the budget, because we have separate budgets. So if we're trying to co-sponsor an event or something like that, I've done it with Amber in Virginia. We'll kind of split the cost, have two separate collaboration agreements, and we make it work with whatever organization we're working with. But in terms of issues, we're all working on the same thing for the most part. We just get to decide how. That's the beauty of being in a state office, is the freedom to be creative and decide how once AARP has given us the what. So there's nothing holding us back at all from doing regional events. I would say what holds me back from doing regional events with West Virginia, for example, is just what Susan was talking about, which is, I don't have a lot of people out there on that border of West Virginia and Maryland, but it has worked with Amber, who's in Northern Virginia, because I have a lot of people on that line. So sometimes the volunteer capacity can be a little bit tricky, but there's truly, to answer your question, there's nothing stopping us. It's something that needs to be proposed. Somebody needs to speak up and say, hey, I think this is something we should do as a team, as a regional team. And if you know our fearless leader, John Kane, he would be thrilled if we started doing that more often. So I think it's just a matter of starting the conversation.
Yeah, we're under Amber, and I think we need to get a little bit stronger in Loudoun County before we start partnering with Frederick or Maryland. But yeah, I'm glad to find out that there's a way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if for some reason, let's say she wanted to do something in Loudoun County and she was looking to increase attendance, or she wanted to recruit volunteers from that specific area, we could work it out so that when she does an e-blast or any kind of communications, that we could share information about Marylanders with her to ensure that she could recruit for events or for volunteers. So that would help too, just to kind of help you build capacity.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Yep.
Okay. Well, now, Jennifer, I think we can let you go, but you've been providing such wonderful information, and we're going to go on with Dr. Clark.
Thank you all.
So much, Jennifer. I'm talking through Deborah's screen, so I'm going to have to talk loud enough so you can hear me. I have a question that I've also put in chat that I'll propose. What options have you identified or tried for your volunteer engagement support? A follow-up question to that is, what are any external sources outside of your state that you've used for volunteer engagement, information, and support? So anyone have a response to that? Again, what options have you identified or tried for your volunteer engagement? And do you have any sources, external sources, whether they be AARP or other volunteer engagement support resources that you've used?
And while you're thinking of that, the question that Susan Jones raised a moment ago, if there's any suggestions on that about how you extend into areas where you don't traditionally, aren't your communities of presence, for example, how do you partner with other people, other groups, other parts of the community to involve your volunteers? Does anyone have some suggestions on that? Feel free to come off mute, raise your hand.
I see Christine from Kentucky. Yeah.
But hi, Susan. I met Susan at the DAO. So I want to speak to that question that you had about the folks that are in the outskirts. And part of the reason that they shifted me to manage the outreach in Lexington is they wanted to free up Daniel Rowe, who is the current ASD, to do exactly what you're talking about, rural outreach. So in Kentucky, we have two communities of presence, Louisville and Lexington. Louisville's a lot bigger, been around longer, and Lexington's only been maybe the last 8 years. So now Daniel is starting to focus on the rural outreach, and he's in a way working in conjunction with our team, because our advisor Marilyn Moran Smith is also working with him on that. And so they sent out letters. You see, we don't have anyone currently there, but they sent out letters to just one district, to some of the community leaders, to say, we're here. We wanted to see if there's anyone that you would identify that would be interested in doing work with us. So that's the start of it. But in addition to that, we have never gone off of being virtual. We have what we call virtual volunteers, and then our regular volunteers that are now in person. So at every monthly meeting, we have our Zoom up there, and we typically have anywhere from 5 to 8 volunteers that still Zoom in. And part of that reason is we do have several that are now experiencing health challenges, so they're not able to get around as easily, or our full-time workers that can take a lunch break. So there's a few of them that come in. But I could see how maybe in the future, folks that live in the outlying areas that want to get involved, we'll be able to welcome them if they decide they want to start, and they can get an overview within our area that's going on. So that's just some feedback.
Thank you, Christine. That's great information. Thank you. I see Aaron put in the chat, has anybody partnered with any of the Area Agency on Aging? So those are tremendous partner organizations. Anyone want to speak to any organizations they partnered with for volunteer engagement, sororities and fraternities in your areas? Many of them have some of the same areas of focus, like caregiving or health, brain health, that we do. Any ideas bubbling out there that you want to share? Has anybody used the Office of Volunteer Engagement? Any of my colleagues, the Volunteer Facilitation and Training team, have you had presentations, workshops, facilitations with any of us, helping with volunteer summits? Let me hear some other voices other than my own and Deborah's. We like to hear other voices. I see Christine put in the chat, yes, definitely great partnership. That's the AAAs. Patrick, I saw you come off. You need to talk, yes.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much. one of the things that we're looking to do, we just recently, the New Hampshire Attorney General has hired 5 new, or is planning on hiring 5 new staff people to combat fraud. And so we're going to reach out to that organization to see how we can partner with them. Perhaps it's just getting the word out about these new resources, but I think it's taking advantage of, this is a natural opportunity. It just happened, we saw it, and now we're going to try to move forward with it.
That's an excellent example and an excellent opportunity for New Hampshire. Thank you so much for sharing that. Nebraska, Susan says, has used AARP magazine and bulletins to recruit volunteers. Susan, you want to speak to that and how you use that for great success?
Sure. I would just say that we were looking to build a speakers bureau, and we wanted to start with the fraud watch area because we needed some people to go out in the communities and talk about that. It's such a hot topic and everyone's interested. And so we put the ad in the bulletin and the magazine, and we got a lot of people that volunteered for our fraud watch team that way. So
that's great. So that goes to show that people do read that magazine.
Yes, they do.
Mary
You mean-
Roberge. Yes.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, because, we're a small state in New Hampshire. We do have, 3 strong communities. But we also are cognizant of the fact that we need to go into other areas of the state. So we will try, we've done it in the past, and we're just starting to get back into it, to go into a different area of the state and hold an event. I mean, you don't have to have meetings all the time, but I think if you have a fun event, like once or twice a quarter, that lets people see AARP, that gives them a road into joining us and finding out more about us. We have one volunteer in particular who's on the western part of the state, and she travels to all the other events on the other side of the state. And she's really interested in doing something. So you could have an ice cream night in a different part of the state. You don't have to have it in your active communities.
Great ideas. And I know that there's several communities that have coffees, they come
Right.
under different names, or nights out at the, brew nights out at the pub, local pubs or something like that. Those fun events sometimes are what we need to draw in people just to begin the conversation, because they ask, and especially when volunteers are basically running those events, they ask you, well, how did you become involved as a volunteer? So, Deborah, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know we're coming close to the end, and I know that you have a question that you might want to ask.
Well, this question has always intrigued me, and I'm hoping it intrigues you as well. And if budget constraints were not a barrier, what would you try in support of volunteers?
Mary, you're laughing like
And so is Susan, but
like you want to roll on the floor and laugh.
But really and truthfully, one of the things that I keep finding from these meetings is that people are always making suggestions that others haven't considered yet. So, if one of you may trigger anything, someone else maybe have a chance to use that. So, Mary, would you like to share, since you've come off mute?
Oh, my imagination could go wild, but I really think the best recruitment tool ever is your actual volunteers. If you treat them well, okay, if you form those relationships between the volunteers and the state office. And I know about having close-knit communities, because eventually you have the same volunteers off volunteering at the same event. So they do become close friends. So between that and between taking care of your volunteers and treating them well, they're going to turn around and they're going to say, hey, look at this great organization that I volunteer for. I volunteer for another, the community theater. And we have to purchase our own attire. But when you say to somebody that's looking at an ARP, well, you don't have to purchase your jacket or you don't have to purchase your t-shirt. I mean, right there is like, oh, really? And they start looking at that and they look at the fun events. So I really do. I think the best is word of mouth. I'll keep my brilliant ideas until I can formulate something else.
And Mary, you have agreement from Susan, and yes, volunteers draw and recruit other volunteers just by who we are and what we do and what we emanate. So I agree. Christine Jackson, you're off mute. You're on you want to talk.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with Mary too. But one thing, if you said if there was no budget limit, years ago, OVE had that, they called it the Leadership Academy. And they did that training with, I think they did it for several years. And so each year they had a state staff and then a volunteer lead. And they brought us in and it was like a whole year endeavor. And every other month they brought us over to the Potomac in Virginia. And I got to be involved in it. And that really was so useful. And I didn't know it was a stepping stone, right? Laying things out, but it really helped me to understand ARP better. But I would love, not just for a lead, but anyone interested to be able to be invited. But what was great was when you're in there with volunteers from Hawaii or, what's the island? I forgot that's a territory of, yes. And, DC, and it was just very invigorating to get a picture of folks from in person, interaction in person. And it really kind of brings it to life, how we're all connected. And it was a teaching thing. It wasn't just for fun, but it did it all, and in OVE, that was my first introduction to OVE and some incredible people in that office.
I have to agree, Christine. I participated in it probably about 5 years ago, and we were in Dallas every other month. They took us to Dallas, so it was a great opportunity. And I'm gonna suggest that if there was no budget limits, that would be a wonderful opportunity to reestablish. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, anyone else with some suggestions? And and I'll tell you, one of the reasons we're doing or asking this question is I know all of us are in the planning for upcoming. Okay, so one of the things that they're telling us now in terms of planning is to think about all the things you might want to do before you just go in thinking about, oh, this is what I've done, and I know that there are limits. But if you think about all the things you might try, it might give you a better way to even approach some of the things, when you get down to the limits of money. So and we're trying that here now, trying to figure out those things to do. So thank you all very much. I did want to, Patrick has gone, and he was the gentleman who asked about having the Attorney General had hired staff. And I was going to let him know that one of the ways that you can work with that is you can actually go out in partnership as a fraud speaker with the Attorney General, particularly if they are not running for office. Done that in a couple of states, and that is useful. It helps the volunteer, it gives them a chance. It also gives the Attorney General staff a chance to understand how experienced and how much expertise volunteers at AARP bring on the subject of fraud. So that is a way to approach and help the Attorney General move into those communities. Now, we have reached the end of our time today, which seems like it's gone really quickly. Our next time together will be November 14th, next to the last month of the year. And we're going to talk then about technology being used to encourage volunteer engagement and identifying targeted outcomes for event success so that we have a longitudinal perspective about what volunteers are engaged in and what their value is to the organization and to our community. So thank you all very much. We've recorded this session and we appreciate your coming on today and hope to see you on the 14th of November.
Take care, enjoy the fall afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye.